sitting over there in his cabin doing some hunting and fishing.
There are some problems here. Sorry, big time.
I'm so upset. Oh my God.
Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we have a pretty big deal of a show ahead for you all. Lots of stories to get to. The bond markets are going crazy. Yes, it has to do with the ongoing quagmire war against Iran. We're also going to talk about the latest updates in the war against Iran and where Trump's head is at, which could change at any moment, obviously, because the guy has no idea what he's doing. I'll make that case in just a little bit. But in the bonus episode for our members, I will be interviewing Candace Owens today about both her debate with Andrew Wilson, but more importantly, some of the material that she has presented on her program, exclusive material that she got her hands on in this ongoing investigation that she's been doing. And while people just wanna brush her off as crazy Candace, these are usually people who don't ever engage with the material that she presents on her show. And I will confess that I've been a bit of a coward myself because I don't want to deal with the heat that she's been getting. But I think I'm ready to deal with the heat because I think it's worth it. And I want to show some of that material and more, again, in our bonus episode for our members. They will get all of that content first. And we will later post it for everybody on our various platforms. But members will get it first. And if you do want to become a member, just go to tyt.com/join. All right, well, without further ado, why don't we get started with some other news, including the latest in our war against Iran.
President Trump says there are no ongoing talks with Iran right now as tensions remain escalated across the region. Iran launching new attacks, reportedly firing 2 missiles at the UAE on Tuesday. Millions forced to take shelter as a result. President Trump reiterating the Strait of Hormuz is still open and the US naval blockade is in effect.
Well, I mean, as usual, Trump is lying, okay? The disastrous quagmire war that we find ourselves suffering through, thanks to Israel, of course, continues to translate into, the Strait of Hormuz remaining closed. It's not open. In fact, here's what's actually happening with the strait.
Iran says the critical waterway will stay closed until the US meets certain conditions.
And let me make it clear, until America implements its commitments under the Memorandum of Understanding, including lifting the blockade on the release of frozen assets, lifting the oil sanctions, ending threats and military operations on all fronts, and other conditions that America has agreed to under the understanding, the strait will not be reopened.
The strait will not be reopened until the Trump administration agrees to the conditions set in the Memorandum of Understanding. Now, currently, Trump is pretending like he has made the decision to take a different approach in the war. Rather than re-engage kinetically by striking Iran, Trump is holding out hope that Tehran will, eventually cave to his economic pressure campaign. Now, I would argue that this approach is, less about the administration making a strategic pivot and more about the fact that we've depleted our missiles and interceptors. Homeboy's got no choice. Regardless, economic pressure through more sanctions is unlikely to work. Iran has been dealing with US imposed economic sanctions since the Iranian Revolution in 1979. And look, please, I'm just a dumb talk show host. Please don't take my word for it. As Politico reports, US ambassadors and other Middle East experts are skeptical that tightening the economic vice will force Iran to relinquish its desire to toll ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz and make the other concessions Trump is demanding to bring an end to the war. Now, it would make more sense, in my opinion, to engage in diplomatic negotiations with Iran to get the Strait of Hormuz open again. But the ship seems to have sailed on that. Now, who would really trust the United States with Trump acting as erratically as he does? Former Middle East ambassador James Jeffrey, who actually did serve in Trump's first term, even went on the record telling Politico that it's hard to believe there will be something decisive after 20 years of US sanctions and Iranian experience of going around them. Even those close to Trump, who are generally supportive of maintaining economic pressure on Iran, are pretty wobbly in their defense of these sanctions. In fact, one former Trump administration official who was granted anonymity by Politico said the following, quote, "I think the economic pressure would need to hit them in new ways we haven't seen so far to change the mindset of the regime." Yeah, that's the ticket. More sanctions in different ways, yeah. Meanwhile, Iranian leaders are mocking US efforts to sanction them into submission. Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, the Speaker of Iran's parliament, said on X that Americans think squeezing Iran harder will win concessions that were never part of the agreement. Bessent and Defense Secretary Hegseth are way out of their league. Stop waiting for the clown crew to pull a rabbit out of their hat and clean up the mess you made. Even some anchors on Fox Business are side-eyeing the sanctions strategy and are even willing to challenge its effectiveness. In fact, get a load of how this Fox Business host just challenged Victoria Coates, the vice president of the Heritage Foundation.
Because of the maximum pressure campaign of President Trump's first term, their economy is really distorted. They can't produce what they need domestically. And so they're very heavily reliant on imports. So this action by UAE, combined by the effects of the blockade keeping other imports out of Iran, is really going to have a devastating effect.
Between the economy and needing those imports to come into the country and not being able to get oil out and other economic sanctions, you would think that this was a regime that was on the brink of collapse, Victoria. And I imagine that's part of the US strategy right now. Why escalate if that would be something that is coming down the pike? But for whatever reason, the regime is able to hold on. And there are even more reports that Russia is supplying Iran with shipping drones and possibly even explosives. So they're replenishing weaponry and giving them the ability to snap back and bite back and attack and be on the offensive now.
Now, I'm not sure about the claim that Russia is getting weapons to Iran, because fact of the matter is, Iran has the manufacturing capacity to build their relatively inexpensive drones, and they have re-upped their missile inventory. So that's the reality on the ground. The United States, on the other hand, has depleted its weaponry on behalf of Israel, and we find ourselves incredibly vulnerable in this situation. But look, I don't want to make it seem as though Iran hasn't suffered at all. They have suffered economically and will continue to do so. And when I say suffer, I'm not talking simply about the IRGC or the mullahs or the supreme leader. I'm talking about the very people of Iran that this administration and all sorts of Zionists across the country purported to care so much about. We are so worried about the poor Iranians, which is why we want to starve them to death. So anyway, Iran's year-over-year inflation has risen 88%. Food prices have more than doubled. But the United States, along with the global economy, is also suffering. Not only have energy and food prices risen in the United States, the yield on 30-year US government bonds jumped on Tuesday to its highest level since just before the global financial crisis. Okay, so we're gonna cover that at length later in the show. But in case anyone thinks the bond market's behavior has absolutely nothing to do with the war, Politico admits that, look, the increase in the yield to its highest level in nearly 2 decades is, but isn't solely because of the 6-month war. Global fuel shortages, which is caused by the war, and broader instability, which is caused by the war, have kept energy prices higher for longer, increasing the threat of persistent inflation. In other words, the war. Like, what was that paragraph? Anyway, let me continue. What does this all mean? So Julia Coronado, who's the founder of Macro Policy Perspectives, says that we are in a situation where we're spending more and more to finance more and more. By the way, our national debt officially hit $40 trillion today. Congratulations. So we find ourselves in a game of chicken with Iran. This is game theory. Who will cave to economic pressure first? Iran sees this fight as a war for their survival, while Americans just don't. In fact, Americans don't even support this war. Americans also are not accustomed to, they're not used to the type of economic pain that Iran has grown accustomed to for decades. Keep in mind that the midterms are coming up, and the latest Reuters Ipsos poll shows that Trump's approval rating is tanking. It has sunk all the way down to 33%. And that is not going to translate to a good outcome for the Republican Party in the midterms. So the pressure is on for Trump. The question is, will he find a way to end this through diplomatic means? Or are we gonna continue on with this closure of the Strait of Hormuz being the new status quo, which of course is gonna lead to ongoing inflation that harms Americans who have already been in a pretty bad economic situation to begin with. That's where we're at. That's the reality. But anyway, why don't we actually turn to the news today about what's going on with our bond markets? Because that is in fact related to the war, and I think it's important for you all to know about what's going on here. So let's get to the details. The Trump administration was basically forced to intervene after government borrowing costs hit a nearly 20-year high today. 20-year high. So should we be worried? My answer, spoiler alert, yes, we should be worried. But I want to explain why. So let's try to get through this. It's dense. Some people might not be familiar with how bond markets work. I would be one of them. I'm not an expert on this. But through some digging, I think I have a pretty firm grasp on what's going on here. So this all has to do with yields on 30-year treasury bonds. Okay, to understand how treasury bonds work, essentially investors invest in our bonds under the understanding that at some point, they will get a return, a percentage on their investment in US bonds, okay? Now, the reason why bonds exist is to finance various things that our government does. Now, if the sentence that I read you earlier, right, that this has to do with yields on 30-year treasury bonds makes your head spin, it's okay, think of it this way. We are talking about how expensive it is for the government to borrow long term. So think of the investor as saying, I'm willing, sure, I'm willing to give you this loan by investing in your bonds. But I'm expecting a higher yield. I want higher interest, essentially, higher return on this investment. So let's continue. The yield or return on a 30-year treasury topped 5.3% in early morning trading Tuesday. So that's the highest level recorded since 2007. So that already should be a massive red flag, but I'll continue. So Professor Paul Krugman helpfully explained why this phenomenon is happening. What is the cause of all this? And he wrote on his Substack page that interest rates on government debt can rise for two main reasons. First, they can rise because the overall demand for credit in the economy is running ahead of supply, meaning the government is spending more than it's taking in from these investors. Krugman also explains that right now there are two huge entities that need a lot of credit, they need a lot of money, they need a lot of financing. Who am I talking about? First, there's of course artificial intelligence, AI. So the AI so-called hyperscalers such as Alphabet, Amazon, and Microsoft, well, they are pouring billions and billions of dollars into building infrastructure, namely these data centers. Okay, so that's the first reason, but here's the second reason. Our massively high national debt, okay? We are so indebted. The federal government is so indebted, and that has become very costly. So the recent large increase in interest rates is a consequence of soaring demand for credit, both to build data centers and to cover federal deficits. We are spending more than we are bringing in, which is why it is crazy, I can't curse, it is crazy that just yesterday it was announced that the federal government signed a deal for Raytheon to produce more Tomahawk missiles so we can continue on with this dog and pony show in the Middle East on behalf of a tiny, irrelevant foreign country that does nothing for us and wants to build its empire, Israel, okay? $22 billion deal to build more Tomahawk missiles. Should we be spending money on that when we're $40 trillion in debt? I don't think so, but who cares? I mean, I'm just an American living in a so-called democracy where my views, which most Americans agree with, don't matter at all. But let me continue with what else is going on here. So why are the interest rates on government debt increasing? So investors expect what's referred to as like a risk premium, right? So the idea is they want a higher return on their investment if they're going to buy US bonds. And that's because they don't trust our government. They either don't trust that our government is going to be able to honor its debt obligations. They might also be concerned that the US could either default or stoke inflation in order to manipulate currency, to shrink the real value of the debt. So in other words, the fear is that the government could weaponize inflation to devalue currency. In other words, no one trusts us, and we're having a difficult time in the bond market as a result of that. And inflation, by the way, is already a major concern. As the Washington Post notes, the collapse of the fragile US-Iran ceasefire has reignited fears that an interruption in Persian Gulf oil supplies will keep energy costs and inflation high. On Thursday, remember this is Thursday of last week, Brent crude, the global oil benchmark, neared $88 per barrel, up from around $72 during the recent pause in hostilities. Now, when it comes to the cost of Brent crude, or the cost of oil per barrel, something to keep in mind is that the Trump administration has been able to kind of manipulate the cost by releasing oil from our strategic petroleum reserve. And it is running low. So what happens when we run out? It's gonna be a bit of a disaster, and Trump has announced that there are no diplomatic talks happening with Iran at all as we speak. That's the first time he's confessed that. So we're not in a good place. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed. The Houthis continue attacking Saudi vessels in the Red Sea. Not good, very bad. But there's more. When investors get worried about inflation, they sell bonds. And the US wants to prevent that. Now, Japan recently was in a bit of a pickle and the US came in and bailed them out. And the reason why isn't because we're looking out for the homies. Let's be very real about that. The reason why the Trump administration intervened to help Japan is because had the Trump administration avoided doing so, Japan would have sold US treasuries. I mean, that's what they would do. They would sell the bonds. And the US doesn't want that. So that's why Bessent actually stepped in to partly save Japan. Now, with that in mind, when the investors get worried about inflation and sell bonds, that ends up lowering the price of the bonds while sending yields even higher, meaning the interest rates that the government would have to pay to the investors, those go higher. So that in turn is a big problem, as we all know, and the Trump administration has decided to take action to do something about this, and it has to do with more manipulation, which in the short term appears to be working. The question is this gonna work in the long term when you're not actually addressing the underlying economic issues here? So with that in mind, today, the Trump administration took action with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announcing that our federal government will double its repurchases of long-term bonds for a few months. So if you don't know what I'm talking about here, here's an easy way to understand it. Think of this as what corporations do with corporate stock buybacks. In this case, it's the federal government buying its own bonds, okay, to increase the value. Now, to finance this jujitsu move that Bessent is carrying out, the Treasury will issue more short-term debt. Remember, what we're talking about right now is the 30-year bond. In this case, we're talking about short-term debt, which is going to be used, or more of that is going to be issued in order to finance this little trick that Scott Bessent is engaging in. And look, that could be risky. More short-dated issuance makes government finances even more exposed to any rise in interest rates, which would quickly feed through into higher borrowing costs. But again, for now, it does appear that Scott Bessent's calculation has paid off. Apparently, he's a master of manipulation in markets. So in a legal way, he's not doing anything illegal as far as I can tell. So as intended, Treasury yields did go down today. But Bessent's maneuver did nothing, as I mentioned earlier, to deal with the underlying economic conditions at play. And he also weakened the dollar in the process. So if you're asking yourself, okay, why is the government intervening? Like, why is this such a big deal? Well, the Treasury market is the largest bond market in the world, and yields on the government's debt are used across the world as a benchmark for things like business loans and mortgages. Higher Treasury yields typically translate into what? Oh yeah, into higher interest rates throughout the economy, reducing affordability for households at a time when many are already struggling to make ends meet. That's according to analysis by the New York Times. And our national debt is a massive problem. There's no question about it. And the Trump administration is only exacerbating it by continuing to fund conflicts and wars abroad. So with a national debt of, it's now $40 trillion officially, it hit $40 trillion today. Washington this year is expected to spend more than $1 trillion on interest. That's how much it's costing us just to service our loans, or service our debt, I should say. That's roughly what taxpayers spend on Medicare each year, according to the Congressional Budget Office. If long-term Treasury yields stayed 0.5 percentage point higher than current budget projections assume, the government's annual interest bill could swell by roughly $95 billion by 2028, an April Congressional Budget Office analysis suggests. So that's why it's a big deal. It's a big deal for our country's economy. It's a big deal on a very personal, individual level. Each household is gonna be feeling this. But there is no discussion about changing the foundation of what led us to where we are today. We just keep putting Band-Aids on things. The Fed keeps printing money. The federal government invests in its own, its own bonds to jack up the value artificially. It's what they do. That's where we're at. So this war has had tremendous economic consequences for Americans and the global economy already, and there's no end in sight. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back. This is our first social break. Let me read some comments before we get to our next segment, and we will be talking about that pervy wanker over in Florida. If you know, you know. Anyway, our member section, we have Art Guy who says Anna is looking powerful and unstoppable today. Thank you. I've been glued to my computer working on the show like intensely all day. So I'm really proud of the show we put together today. Jenks left tricep of fury says Trump always looks like he just soiled his diaper. True.
That's what I do.
That is true. We were talking about this. We were talking about this yesterday. Wedge says, Anna, there is nothing dumb about you. Go Salt Queen. Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's go over to our Twitch section where Canadian Skull Dragon says, bring the fire. I certainly will. And Tyrannichismanic says, watching for years, but 6 months subscription. Thank you for being a subscriber. I hope you're enjoying the program. And if you're not a member, consider being one, because I really do think the discussion I'm gonna have with Candace Owens in regard to her own investigation of the Charlie Kirk assassination will be revelatory for some of you, because look, I don't begrudge anyone who doesn't have the time to like watch her show regularly and understand what she's actually arguing in context, or what she has presented in terms of, materials that do cast doubt on the narrative that we've been fed. But I've gathered what I think you guys need to see, and then you make your own decision. It is what it is. It's not that difficult. Navinik says, we're getting our ass whooped by 3 for $10 drones. That's not quite true, but kinda. Yeah.
Antifa! Al-Qaeda!
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. Anna Kasparian with you. And if you spent any time on X over the last 24 hours, you certainly came across a story involving a government official in Florida who has, now been arrested for abusing a child under the age of 12 years old in his own family. And I want to share that story with you. He is a nefarious figure, to say the least, for even other reasons. But this really does take the cake. So here we go. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis's appointee to Palm Beach County's clerk of courts and comptroller has been arrested on child sex abuse charges. So let me just pause here before I continue. This is a story that has to do with and will detail instances of sexual abuse. I want to give you a warning of that in case you have a difficult time hearing details like that. I know that there are many people out there who have been abused horrifically, and I just want to make sure that you are able to tune out if you need to. Now, with that said, Mike Caruso, the man accused, was one of DeSantis's closest allies in the state legislature prior to his appointment, and even accompanied the governor and, of course, Congressman Randy Fine on a trip to Israel a few years ago to sign a Florida censorship bill that Caruso authored. So more on that in a minute. First, let's actually get to the really disgusting and horrific details of what Caruso is accused of doing, which his own wife alleges is a life in jail kind of thing. And you know what? It turns out that her husband agrees with her assessment. In fact, the person who turned Caruso in was his own son. When Caruso tried to dissuade his son from speaking to the authorities, he allegedly warned that he would get arrested and go away. Now, thankfully, that didn't deter his son. Now, 67-year-old Caruso faces felony charges including child molestation, kidnapping, and lewd exhibition. Now, according to the August 18th arrest affidavit, the charges stem from the suspected abuse of a boy in Orange County, Florida. Now, I'm gonna pause and just say, the affidavit was poorly redacted, and everyone knows at this point, everyone was able to deduce that the person that Caruso allegedly abused is his own grandchild. Yeah. So the boy, who is described as younger than 12 years old, told his father that Caruso sexually touched him and exposed himself on several occasions between the fall of 2024 and August of 2025. Now, Caruso, of course, denies the allegations and even suggests that his ex-wife made the whole thing up. She fabricated the allegations to poison the child against him. But the boy detailed an incident during a family cruise in which Caruso allegedly offered to buy the boy ice cream in order to separate him from his parents. So the child said Caruso never bought ice cream, but instead assaulted him in private. The boy's uncle later recalled that Caruso had changed clothes when he returned. So gross, so creepy. So the boy also told authorities that Caruso took him fishing at a pond in November of 2024 and touched him while the two were alone. He also said that on Thanksgiving Day 2024, Caruso fondled him and exposed himself during a game Caruso called Tickle Monster, which involved touching the boy's buttocks and crotch. So, fair warning, one of the most stomach-churning allegations the boy made is in fact detailed in the affidavit, as the others were, and it goes as follows. So on or about October 22nd, 2025, and you're actually looking from the actual, you're looking at the actual affidavit right now. Victim's father, redacted, observed victim engaging in sexualized behavior with victim's younger brother. Specifically, redacted observed victim place his testicles and penis upon the face of his younger brother. He immediately intervened, and victim told redacted that when on a family cruise in the summer, his grandfather, Caruso, placed his pee-pee in his mouth and peed, and it was nasty. When a family member confronted Caruso with these claims back in December, Caruso admitted to taking the boy fishing and isolating him from his parents on the cruise, but he denied ever abusing the boy. Now, here's where things get a little tricky for Caruso, pretty damning for Caruso, this allegedly sick piece of crap. In February, the family member, which again we can deduce is his son, spoke with Caruso again in a conversation recorded at law enforcement's request. So here we have evidence. Caruso argued the allegations were impossible because sexual attraction is directed toward one sex. And since he is attracted to women, he could not be a sex offender, the affidavit states. Right, okay. Well, that has to be the weakest defense I've ever heard in my life. But the allegedly disgusting pedophile continued speaking and only incriminated himself. He said, quote, "If you report this to the authorities, there won't be any of me left, I can tell you that." He then offered, in the recording, to flee and never return to Orange County, Florida, where his family lives. Now again, luckily his son turned him in, but the harm caused to the boy is very real. He's been going to therapy for treatment since April, and the affidavit discloses that his therapist noted that he's suffering from symptoms consistent with trauma. Since these allegations emerged, Governor DeSantis, who appointed Caruso in August of last year, signed an executive order suspending him from office. I mean, it's the least he can do. Obviously, his guilt needs to be proven in court, but if our legal system had a burden of proof standard low enough, I mean, you could convict this guy on face alone. I mean, look at him. Now, ironically, Caruso supported the death penalty for pedophiles as a Florida state lawmaker in 2023. Now, aside from preying on boys in his own family, allegedly, Caruso also worked to trample on the rights of Floridians who, might have a problem with Israel's genocide, child slaughter, and land theft in the Middle East. Or, the normalized Jewish supremacy espoused through Zionist ideology. The IHRA definition of anti-Semitism claims that criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic. I obviously vehemently disagree with that. And Caruso made this a crime in Florida. So here's Caruso promoting his so-called anti-Semitism bill while speaking with Floridian Chris Nelson.
If we do nothing, we're gonna have 1933's Nazi Germany all over again. And so I've sponsored HB 269, and what it does is it makes acts of anti-Semitism when done in connection with another crime, such as littering or projection on the buildings or defacement through graffiti of cemeteries and all, makes it a third-degree felony punishable by 5 years in prison. But understand, handing out flyers with a hateful message is First Amendment right to everybody. It's when you just go through neighborhoods and discard them on the ground. Okay, that's a crime. That's a littering crime. Okay, and that won't be tolerated, especially if it involves a anti-Semitic message. So you're making it a felony to litter, pretty much. That's what you're? No, we're making it a felony to express acts of anti-Semitism while committing another crime.
Didn't know that Republicans felt so strongly about littering. Republican lawmakers. I'm sure there are Republican voters who do care about littering. But based on the behavior of Republican lawmakers, both on a state and federal level, doesn't seem like they care at all. But anyway, we know what's really going on here. It's a way of criminalizing speech. Now, to add insult to injury, the anti-speech bill was signed into law by Governor Ron DeSantis, not on American soil, not in Florida, but on Israeli soil. Not only was Caruso by his side during the signing ceremony, Republican Congressman Randy Fine, who's a notorious glutton for child slaughter, was there too. There they are, just disgusting, loathsome human beings. Now, as Palm Beach County Clerk, Caruso forced Palm Beach's residents to invest $1 billion into Israeli bonds. Now, if that sounds like a lot, it's because it is. That amount represents a whopping 18% of the county's entire portfolio. And by the way, isn't it so strange how Israel just seems to attract so many loathsome pedophiles as ardent defenders? Anyway, as this case plays out, no one should be surprised if other survivors come forward, sadly. Why do I say that? Well, the Florida State House's website notes that Caruso's affiliations include the Delray Beach National Little League, which he coached for 30 years. He was also a Club Scout and Boy Scout leader. And if convicted, it remains unclear whether he would advocate for his own execution. Something tells me unlikely, probably not. Anyway, absolutely disgusting story. But at least in this case, it looks like there's gonna be an actual attempt at holding this guy accountable. We'll see how it plays out. I was gonna do another story, but why don't we get the break out of the way? When we come back, I wanna share a positive story with you all because there is some positive news today, although there is an attempt to put a damper on it. I'll explain when we come back.
Oh my God, man, gross.
James Kelly writes in our super chat section and says, yeah, I'm gonna go to jail if my kid told me this happened to him. Honestly, I'm gonna go to jail if your kid told me this happened to him, okay? Like, maybe I'll share this in the next story, but I finally got myself to watch The Voice of Hind Rajab. And I watched it on the flight home from Italy. Not a good idea. Not only was I in tears the entire time, it inspires violent thoughts, that's for sure. Dav Mill says, missed you the first night a week I can watch live. LASD settled over their foot dragging and issuing carry permits. Now you should be able to get one. So, there was that Supreme Court ruling that found that New York's concealed carry laws were in violation of the Second Amendment. And California has really strict concealed carry laws as well. And so they were very slow to respond appropriately to that Supreme Court ruling. To be honest with you, I'm glad that things are changing. There's guns everywhere. So I just think it's crazy that you're gonna have these insanely strict rules when it comes to law-abiding citizens, when it comes to concealed carry. I'm not in favor of open carry, I wanna be clear about that. I think that causes too many problems. But I think concealed carry with the right safeguards in place makes sense. Anyway, let's go to our TYT members. We've got Jumping Jank Flash. Anna's tan is popping tonight, thank you. I hope it lasts, man, because I am a pasty gal. And it has been a while since I've been this tan. How do I maintain it? I can't be in the sun all day. that we will be having Candace Owens on during our members only bonus section. Our members will get the interview first. We will eventually post it for the public later, but why not get it first? tyt.com/join. All right, anyway, let's get to Noble Mobile, one of our partners, because they provide a great service. So if you've ever been watching the show, you've heard about Noble Mobile. We promote them every day. Well, they've got another great deal for you. So new customers who sign up right now get the first month for only $10. That is a steal. After that, you'll never pay over $50 for a month for great unlimited data on T-Mobile's reliable and incredibly fast 5G network. Plus you get cash back every single month for your unused data. In fact, one of our viewers wrote in yesterday about their Noble Mobile account and how much cash there is in there from cash back, which is freaking awesome. That's so, when does the company ever give you cash back? Like for real though. Anyway, plus you can download the app to track your brain rot index. Like I know people care about that, and I know I should be excited to promote it, but if you're into that kind of thing, it's available. If you want to keep track of whether or not your kids are spending too much time on screens, Noble Mobile makes that possible. So check that out. If you want to learn more, just go to tyt.com/switch. Okay, with that being said, I thought the Israelis were 100% gonna get away with slaughtering a little 6-year-old girl as she was trapped in a vehicle of her dead family members who they had killed before they killed her. But it looks like they're at least paying lip service to a possible investigation and consequences. Let's take a look. That was the voice of 6-year-old Palestinian girl Hind Rajab. She was on the phone with Palestinian paramedics, begging them to rescue her after Israelis attacked a vehicle that members of her family were traveling in. They were trying to flee northern Gaza. And when she was speaking in that call that you heard, she was surrounded by her dead family members, trapped in the car with dead family members. Later, the Israelis killed her too, after pretending like they would allow paramedics to get to her to save her. Oh yeah, they killed the paramedics too. Yeah, we've talked about this at length on the show. Now, for the first time, the Israeli government has admitted that their military shot and killed Hind Rajab. Hundreds of bullets aimed at a 6-year-old girl who lost her life. They knew that there was a 6-year-old girl trapped in that car. They knew that the vehicle approaching her vehicle were emergency workers seeking to rescue her. And they killed the emergency workers and slaughtered the 6-year-old girl because they're savages. They are the terrorists. They are the savages. You want to talk about a war between barbarism and civilization? Do you think slaughtering a 6-year-old girl is indicative of civilization? Netanyahu, you giant piece of terrorist crap. But anyway, let me continue with this new and improved Israel, I guess, since they're finally owning up to the fact that they slaughtered this 6-year-old girl. There's a caveat. They're not taking full ownership. In fact, they're blaming the rescue workers who were trying to save her. The very rescue workers that they killed. By the way, for those who think that what's going down in Gaza is a pretendicide, how do you make excuses for the Israeli military slaughtering a 6-year-old girl? They knew it was a 6-year-old girl. They knew the vehicle approaching her were emergency workers seeking to rescue her, and they slaughtered the emergency workers and the 6-year-old girl. How do you provide cover for that? I'm just curious. The Israeli military is opening a criminal investigation into the slaughter of Hind Rajab. The Israeli Defense Forces had previously denied involvement in the January 2024 killing. What laughable. Saying months later that a preliminary investigation found its forces were not present near the vehicle or within firing range of the vehicle. You want to know why they said that? Because if an Israeli's mouth is moving, they're lying. It was obvious that they were lying. You want to know why it was obvious? Because everything was recorded. in these emergency calls with that little 6-year-old girl's voice now seared into my mind and into the minds of any empathetic, warm-blooded human being. Much like everything else the IDF says, again, lie. They originally lied. Now, in a statement, the IDF said that the findings of the examination indicate the IDF troops fired at a vehicle that was approaching them. Fired at a vehicle that was approaching them. The vehicle, I don't know if they're talking about the vehicle that Hind Rajab's family was in. You know, the one that was fleeing northern Gaza so they didn't get killed, but they got killed anyway. Is that the vehicle that was so terrifying that the IDF needed to kill everyone in it? Following review of the findings, and due to apparent failures in the coordination of the movement of the Palestinian Red Crescent ambulance, it has been decided to initiate a criminal investigation of the incident by the Military Police Criminal Investigation Division. Okay, they are full of crap. They are disgusting liars. So if you watch the film, The Voice of Hind Rajab, which is difficult to watch. I just watched it recently. I knew of its existence and I couldn't get myself to watch it because even reporting on the story brings me to tears and I didn't want to put myself through that. But I finally watched it, and the painstaking efforts the Palestinian Red Crescent made to ensure that they had appropriate coordination with the IDF is mind-boggling. In fact, there was an internal fight as this was all playing out because the little girl was in danger and she was desperate to get saved. She was also afraid of the dark, something that I learned through the film. And as it was getting dark outside, her pleas for help were becoming more and more desperate. So you have the individual in the Palestinian Red Crescent working hard to ensure that their coordination is like just bulletproof. It's because if it's not, they know they run the risk of the terrorists, the Israelis, slaughtering everybody, including Hind Rajab. But there were others in the room who wanted to go. We gotta save her, we gotta save her. Anyway, long story short, the IDF knew it was an emergency vehicle. The IDF knew exactly where the emergency vehicle was. And as it got closer to Hind Rajab's vehicle, in order to save her, they killed the emergency workers. Okay, pretending to be ignorant, like, oh, we didn't know, it's the Palestinian Red Crescent's fault because God forbid the Israelis ever take responsibility for anything they ever do. We see you for what you are. We see you. So loathsome and disgusting. It's like the behavior of a freaking toddler. No, it wasn't me, it wasn't me. The Palestinian Red Crescent made us shoot, hundreds of bullets at a 6-year-old girl trapped in a car of her dead relatives. Every once in a while, there's like some disgusting Zionist who like shares a clip of me. It's like, oh, Anna's angry. Yeah, I'm angry, bitch. Why aren't you angry? You like the child slaughter? You disgusting heathens, like horrible people. Anyway. So in other words, they just push the blame on the emergency workers. But this case is one of 2 high-profile incidents where Israel, honestly, they probably had no choice but to open criminal investigations because the international community isn't letting it go. So I think this is just lip service. I don't think anything will actually come of this. Because honestly, if you ask me, those IDF soldiers should be executed. Okay, they should be executed. For killing an innocent 6-year-old girl, they should be executed. Will that happen? No. Will they spend the rest of their lives in prison? No. So your little phony investigation means nothing to me. And here's another reason why I don't expect any accountability. The IDF General Staff's fact-finding and assessment mechanism concluded investigating 150 incidents which were transferred to the military's top lawyer to decide on opening criminal investigations. Of the 150 inquiries, 5 decisions were published on Wednesday, while the others await a decision from a military. They are greenlighting Israeli terrorism in the West Bank, which had nothing to do with Hamas, had nothing to do with October 7th. They are slaughtering people simply because they're Palestinian, and that includes 6-year-old little girls. Do you guys remember the footage of the little girl who was trying to get water to her family? And she's by herself. She's trying to get water to her family. She's carrying nothing but water, a jug of water. And an IDF sniper shoots her and kills her. Endless footage like that. Sprinkled all throughout the Gaza Strip, which has been totally annihilated by the Israelis through the use of our weapons. And guess what? We are now fighting Israel, that genocidal regime's war. We are fighting their war, destroying the global economy, destroying our cost of living on behalf of a nasty genocidal regime that seeks to expand its empire. That's what they want to do. Oh, but it's a pretendicide. It's a pretendicide. Ugh. Anyway, this is who the Israelis are, and I don't think anyone can save them. This is what they do. This is who they want to be. They think they're they think they're above any criticism. They want to criminalize anyone who calls out their treachery. They want to violate our First Amendment rights if we have, the audacity to point to their treachery. But they're treacherous. What do you want me to say? And I will suffer any consequence in order to have the ability to tell Israelis on a daily basis, your government is disgusting. The majority of you, according to public opinion polls, agree with the disgusting things your government and military does. And I want nothing to do with you. The US should abandon you like yesterday. And hopefully at some point that actually happens. Oh boy, that's gonna be an existential threat to Israel. I don't care. I don't care. So I said that there was a positive story in the rundown. This was the positive one. Sorry, that's the messed up world we live in. I apologize for that. But anyway, in the next hour, we're gonna talk about Natalie Harp. If you're not familiar with her, I don't know how you're watching this show right now because you obviously know a lot about politics. But Natalie Harp is one of Trump's closest staffers and she seems to be a little bit obsessed with him. She's been doing some funny stuff, man, some real funny stuff. And I'm kind of on the brink of feeling bad for her, but there's also some consequences to what's going on here. So I'll talk about that in detail in the next hour. But first, I do want to read some comments since I usually don't have enough time to read as many as I want during our breaks. Let's go to our TYT.com members. We have Kat Danae, who sent 5 TYT gift memberships. Thank you, and thank you to new members. Welcome, I hope you guys enjoyed the show today. Jump in, Jank Flash says, to be fair, starving people to death is the normal MO for the Israeli government these days. It's also the normal MO for the United States in terms of sanctions. That's what sanctions do. Do you know how many millions of people our government is responsible for killing due to these sanctions? It's just, and they don't work. And they're gonna backfire. I mean, they're already backfiring as, the countries that we sanction come together and find ways around our sanctions. That's what they do. So, Don Data Dragon says, question, how did the national debt rise? Weren't the tariffs supposed to take care of that? Where's the money going if it's not going to our debt? Good point. In fact, there was a story recently about how, because of the Supreme Court ruling in regard to Trump's tariff policy, corporations have been getting refunds from our federal government, or they've been getting money that they have paid in tariff, that we have paid in tariffs, right? So we pay the tariffs, like it is a tax on American consumers. But because of the Supreme Court ruling, Trump has to basically reimburse companies for the amount paid in tariffs, even though we don't know if the companies took on the entire cost. They didn't, consumers did. Anyway, the whole thing is super infuriating and unfair and has also led to the inflationary environment that we find ourselves in. Your left one says college kids were suspended and blacklisted for saying Hind was murdered. I know, because we're an occupied country. We just are. How are you gonna deny it? Those college students getting in trouble for simply having a soul and stating the facts. I wouldn't want to send any of my family members to an Ivy League like that. It's disgusting. Why? Send them to an Ivy League where they're gonna be misinformed, total morons who think like, oh no, Israel is the most moral country with the most moral army, and slaughtering 6-year-old kids is good actually if the Israelis do it. Asimov's prophet says, in the wood chipper you go, pedo. I'm just gonna leave it there. All right, Ryu Rawl says, the Candace show is exceptional. If you guys watch the Candace show, please write in and let me know, because that is maybe the most shocking thing I've read in our Twitch. It's our Twitch subs too, wow. Yeah, I've been watching, and she's been bringing up all sorts of material that no one is willing to engage in, and I think that's weird. I think that's very weird. You should engage with the material. You wanna call her crazy, you wanna call her all sorts of names, oh, she's a grifter. Okay, fine, but you also have to engage with the material that she's presenting. And if you don't, then you're the one who looks suspicious. Also, if you're gonna pay someone $300,000 to debate them, you should probably understand what their actual arguments are. Andrew Wilson is somehow marketed as like, oh, he's such a great debater. He's a great debater. Is he? I don't, based on what? He debates OnlyFans models. Okay, all right. Let's go to Fascist Killa, who says, seeing this right here is then getting tons of bad press, and they're wanting just to make this story go away, the story of Hind Rajab, I'm guessing. But they can't make the 200+ journalist deaths go away, or the multiple doctors that they killed and have been imprisoned go away. And the World Kitchen employees, that's not going away. I mean, you're right. I mean, every time I see a story about how like, oh, Israel's investing hundreds of millions of dollars to manipulate AI, it's like, I love seeing them waste their money, even though it's probably our money, but whatever. Good, waste your money. The whole world has seen what you guys are really about. You're not gonna be able to erase that. And I'm not gonna let people forget. So let's go to Ronald Fan in our YouTube members. Hey TYT family, and to you Solo Anna. Trump is taking too long to agree on opening the Strait of Hormuz. If he keeps lying a lot, we're not going to get through peace. Can we bring Sean Ryan next time? I personally love Sean Ryan. I would love to have him on. He has understandably really soured on the whole political realm, and I don't want to be pushy, so I'm like afraid to ask him to come on. But I'll ask and see if he's willing to do it. And I love the show he does because he provides a perspective on what our service members undergo, both while they're serving and then afterwards when they're veterans. That perspective never gets covered in our media. Like all of the support the troops garbage that you hear in legacy media is just BS lip service to manufacture consent for wars. If you care about our troops, you wouldn't send them to wars on behalf of a foreign country that's seeking to expand its borders. Simon Moody says Iran is holding on like an 80-year-old senator to their office seat. Yeah, yep, that's a great analogy, absolutely. And look, it's because this is a fight for their survival. When you are fighting for your survival, you're on another level when it comes to the amount of pain you are willing to absorb. And by the way, when it comes to economic pain, like I said in that segment, Iran has been dealing with this for many, many decades, and it hasn't worked. So I don't know what makes Trump think it's gonna work this time. All right, and then we have in our X comments, Heinz Gerdian, who says, Anna looking hot as usual, thank you. And the Hall Monitor says, are you going to cover the GTA 6 hack and leak? I don't even know anything about it. We'll look into that maybe for tomorrow's show. That's the most important news today, GTA 6 hack and leak. Okay, guys, make a note of that because it does sound like something we'd want to cover. All right, well, we got to take a quick break. When we come back for the second hour of the show, we'll talk a little bit about this whole Natalie harp story and some of the creepy shenanigans she's been getting involved in. Creepy, funny, but also a little sad. Anyway, come right back.
They knew, and they let it happen.
Indisputable is still the fastest growing news show in America compared to CNN, Fox News, and 30 other networks. We tell the truth on Indisputable because the truth is indisputable. We go places that other news media outlets refuse to go. When there were human rights abuses happening at the Victorville prison, guards and members of the community contacted us.
You, through your investigative reporting, unearthed very troubling allegations about specific forms of abuse and discrimination in the federal prison system.
It really doesn't take much to be a trusted voice. All it takes is to be fearless, report on matters, be an advocate. I called it the bullpen intentionally because it's a place of preparation. We present individuals who may have an opposing view, so we debate. Sometimes we interview individuals because their stories deserve to be heard. A survivor of significant police misconduct and his attorney. We covered this story earlier, and to remind you of the horror of one man being shot at damn near 100 times by the police. We take time on this show to showcase the temper tantrums of Karens in the wild. We do this not because we want to see people's emotional outbursts in public, but because these incidents are emblematic of a bigger societal issue taking place across the nation, and it has to be checked.
My friend, my big homie, attorney at law, Benjamin Netanyahu.
I just want to thank you, man. Educated, articulate brothers like yourself speak truth to power. It makes a great difference in changing the landscape in America. So
listen, no matter what you do, don't allow the politics of ideology to evaporate the soul that still exists inside of you. They don't stop, I don't stop. Racism won't stop, I won't stop. Systemic bias won't stop, I won't stop. People still need health care, so I won't stop. People still need criminal justice systems reform, so I won't stop. You won't stop either.
I'm wearing one of our pieces of merchandise. So the funny thing about the Dragon Squad, and that's what our viewers call themselves. That's the name of the group, but every individual chooses their own name. You might have Cincinnati Dragon. You might have Harry Potter Dragon. We have a Grandma Sunshine Dragon is one of those that I remember. These are people that like to have an element of themselves, their lives, what's significant to them reflected as a part of the community. But the concept of the Dragon Squad is just something I threw away as a joke. I was mocking the Proud Boys, these like right-wing groups that come up with a name for themselves that they think is cool, but it's actually really lame. And I thought, off the top of my head, I can come up with something that's still kind of lame, but much cooler. And so I threw out Dragon Squad, and I just moved on with my life. But everybody liked it, and so they kept it going, and so we've embraced it. And I think again, this was during the period of the pandemic. I think it was sort of nice to have a renewed sense of community, a feeling that you're a part of something when everything seems so chaotic. And as a result of that, we've got independent artists online streaming, making beautiful digital art of dragons. We've got, we've released a number of pieces of merchandise that people love sending us photos of them. And then, by the way, for me personally, people send me, like you can probably see in the background, like a knitted dragon someone sent me. There's a dragon book they sent me, dragon board games they send me. People have done like custom ironworks, making dragon bottle openers. Like the fans are super invested in diamond art and things like that. And so it's great that they send this stuff. Sometime we're gonna have to set up a wall of all of it. But yeah, it's definitely brought the community a lot closer together. The fact that we were no longer in this big studio, I felt a lot more personally attached to people. It felt very immediate. And I know that I personally needed the connection.
I love cows. I love cows.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. Anna Kasparian with you. This is the second hour where things get a little feistier. I mean, the first hour was pretty feisty. If you missed it, definitely check it out later. But for now, why don't we get into this story about a Trump staffer by the name of Natalie Harp, who I kind of wish I knew nothing about, but now I do, and you will too.
And while the sailors on the Lincoln fight his war, while he fruitlessly drains our munitions and oil reserves, the president sleeps through his meetings. He golfs and trades stocks. See, he doesn't want to do the job. He wants to build his ballroom and travel with Natalie on their apparently defenseless flying palace gifted by the Emir of Qatar.
Oh, that was Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff, who is seeking re-election, but honestly, he's also seeking a presidential run in 2028. So he's probably super excited about the fact that simply mentioning Natalie Harp, who's a Trump administration staffer, has led to a lot of attention, because that's what political candidates want. They want attention. Just wanted to get that out of the way. But the name Natalie has been thrown around a lot lately alongside President Trump, which begs the question, who is she? And what kind of weird, unsavory shenanigans does she get involved in? She's pretty obsessed with Trump, we know that. And the first time we heard of her was when Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan over at the New York Times made mention of her. She is a blonde, bright-eyed, and bushy-tailed 35-year-old West Wing aide serving as Trump's executive assistant. So that's her official title. She initially made headlines after being one of the few people that Trump actually chose, handpicked to ride on his secret flight out of Turkey. So this was there was like a decoy flight. He was worried that the Iranians were gonna assassinate him. So he made sure that people like Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and other literal cabinet members were on the actual Air Force One flight, and then Trump was on a different flight in order to protect himself from a potential assassination attempt by the Iranians. I'm sure cabinet officials loved being on, the official flight that everyone thought Trump was on. Anyway, getting back to Harp, she never takes a day off. Oh, we all have one of those in our office, okay? Take a day off, but anyway, she never takes a day off, not even on Sunday. She works out of the Oval Office and she's got a regular seat on Marine One. She texts with world leaders, oh my God, that is so depressing, on the president's behalf. She stays up late with him drafting social media posts. There's more about her, and by the way, it's just gonna keep getting better and better as this segment goes on. So the New York Times also reports that as long as Harp is around, Trump enjoys an unvetted flow of information, some of it poisonous and counterproductive, at least as far as a number of his other advisors are concerned. She supplies him with content she fishes out of the social media gutter, like the video he posted depicting the Obamas as apes. So she's a piece of crap, on top of being a weirdo who's obsessed with a creepy guy in his 80s who appears to crap himself at various public functions. I'm speculating, but it does look like that is what he'd be doing. Okay, let's move on. According to previous reporting by the Times, citing unnamed sources who said she often sourced news from conspiratorial sources and fed Trump positive press about himself, which is unsurprising. Trump loves positive press about himself. Harp is often the final eye on many of Trump's incendiary social media posts, dictating his rants and pressing the button to post them, alarming other aides who aren't there to stop them. Okay, so we've been wondering, because his Truth Social posts have been just as unhinged as ever, but grammatically, spelling wise, they've improved a little bit, and it turns out it's because this Natalie Harp lady is the one posting them. So what's going on here? Why is she in the news other than the fact that John Ossoff, pointed fingers at her or cited her in one of his speeches? Well, she's been deemed by many as the human printer because she literally follows the president around with a portable print. This is my nightmare, okay? I hate the printer on my desk. I have fantasies about throwing it out the window, running it over with my car literally every day. Can you imagine following Trump around with a portable printer? Like, that is torture. You want to talk about enhanced interrogations. You want to talk about torture. I mean, try this method. Try this method. Anyway, so she follows him around with a printer because, I guess Trump wants hard copies of what he's reading. Like, he doesn't want to read it on a screen. He doesn't want to read it on a computer. He wants hard copies. Okay, so she'll print it out for him. So she was a presenter on OAN, because of course she was. She spoke at the 2020 RNC and vehemently believes that Trump won the 2020 election. And she worked for Trump's 2024 presidential campaign before becoming his executive assistant during his second term. Now, as the New York Times puts it, in some ways, Harp is filling a role that Trump has always required, going back to his days as a real estate developer in Manhattan. Back then, there were always secretaries sitting outside his office on the 26th floor of Trump Tower, ready at a moment's notice to hop to it. He referred to these women as the girls. So his relationship with Trump, her relationship with Trump is just a little bit strange for a woman of her age. Now, I get it. Some women, a lot of women, are drawn to power. They find it attractive. I don't know if this has anything to do with her being attracted to him. We'll talk about it in a little bit in more detail, but she has claimed that she has survived cancer because of Donald Trump. So her obsession might have something to do with something entirely different. Maybe it's not a sexual attraction. I just want to kind of put that out there because I do see a lot of people on the left making this about sexual attraction, and I just can't, I literally can't believe it. And you have to expand your mind and think that there could be some other things at play here, including maybe she's just not well. Maybe she's just not well, because obsessive behavior like this is not normal and it's not indicative of someone who's of sound mind. So in Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swann's book, Regime Change, Trump is described as explaining to people that Harp, this is so sad, is the only one who loves him as much as his wife and children. So not at all? I'm kidding. I don't know how much his wife and children love him. Doesn't seem like a lot, but anyway. All his other staff will go off and make money, Trump would say, but Harp will never leave him. A little bit of projection there, Trump, a little bit of projection there. I mean, he has spent his second term being the most corrupt, self-enriching president of all time. So you want to talk about people who are more interested in making money. I mean, the fish rots from the head down. So she's very devoted to Trump to the point that her displays of devotion have reportedly unnerved colleagues, and that's according to the New York Times as well. Several videos shared with the Times show Harp sprinting across great distances to keep up with Trump's golf cart. Oh, so sad. As it putters across his course in Scotland. Quote, I am so sorry if I was an embarrassment walking the course in Scotland, she wrote in a letter to the president that was viewed by the Times. Okay, the letter goes on to say, quote, I want things to always be right between us. Please stop, please stop. I want things to always be right between us. I also know I've been distracted all week, forgetting to eat throughout the days and even forgetting to sleep and only catching a couple hours at a time. That sounds like me when I fell in love with my husband, who's hot, like really hot. Okay, but anyway, the letter concludes, with all my heart, Natalie. So she's done other creepy things, which I have reacted to very minimally on social media. Let's put up graphic 8. So Christopher Hale had posted, according to CNN, after being denied a place in Donald Trump's motorcade en route to his criminal trial in New York City, Natalie Harp jumped into the trunk of a vehicle so she could remain close to him. That is psychotic behavior. There is literally no one in the world I would do that for, including my husband, and I love him a lot, okay? Like that's not normal, it's not normal behavior. Like there's a codependency, weird situation going on here. So why is she so infatuated with Trump? Well, Natalie's brother, Preston, spoke to CNN's Aaron Burnett about his sister's relationship with the president. And I should note that she is apparently estranged from the brother that was noted earlier in the interview. That being said, here's what else he had to say.
What do you think drew her to him?
Definitely not her.
Yeah.
Well, my mom raised us with the idea that American exceptionalism was the correct way of looking at things. That the United States is the boss of the world. That slavery was back then, that was normal. People weren't bad because they had slaves. And honestly, and it's like Trump wants to take all those books out of schools. He wants to rewrite history. And so I think that my sister, unfortunately, didn't break out of that delusion that my mom raised us with. And Trump is like everything that my mom taught us to respect. So I think that's where her infatuation for Trump comes from, honestly, because I don't think it's a physical attraction. Let's get real,
Man, their mom did them real dirty. But I don't think that's the full explanation. Like this is not normal behavior. There's no amount of parental conditioning that would get someone to behave this way at the age of 35. At least I don't think so. I could be wrong. I'm not a mental health professional. So regardless, the brother, Preston, calls the obsession unhealthy because it literally is, and hopes that she wakes up to reality. Here's more of what he had to say.
Trump's best friends are people who are his fan club, and so she's his biggest fan. And so that's probably why he likes her. And she's good looking. She's got a good personality. I don't know.
I want to ask you, Preston, on something
she thinks that he saved. He thinks that he saved her life. So, somebody living with that kind of gratitude, that must feel pretty good.
So I do not know the veracity of this claim, but if this is true, I can definitely see someone being eternally grateful. Someone donated their kidney to my mom so she could survive. She was on dialysis, she had very limited time left, and that kidney saved her life. I am forever indebted to the person who did that. And he is considered a family member now, love him, but I'm not. He lives in a different state. I'm not gonna jump into the trunk of his vehicle. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm okay with living in different state. He's great. It'd be nice if we could hang out more. But my mom's not gonna jump into his trunk. Like that's psychotic behavior. So just to give you a few more details about this. So Harp is allegedly a survivor of bone cancer. She did talk about this publicly. And she says that she survived as a result of something Trump did in 2028. So it was basically legislation providing terminally ill patients access to experimental treatments. And I'm gonna be honest with you, this is one of the good things Trump did in his first term, okay? So his first term, he did a lot of bad things, but he also promoted and passed important legislation. If you're terminally ill, I think you should be allowed to do experimental treatments. Like, why not? And so she honors him as the individual who saved her life. But again, I don't know if that's the full explanation here. And the bigger problem, just taking a step back, because this isn't just about Natalie Harp. I think Natalie Harp is a symptom, an extreme symptom, of a broader problem that we're witnessing with the Trump administration. Trump managed to do a few good things in the first term, like this legislation that Harp references. And he was also kind of constrained because he had some adults in the room. He hated them, but there were people in the room who kind of kept him a little under control. Right now, he is surrounded by people at different layers or levels of Natalie Harp syndrome. In other words, they're all telling him what he wants to hear. He's surrounded by yes men and women. No one is giving him a perspective or getting him information that would, maybe mitigate his worst tendencies. That's the bigger problem here. And what's also kind of evident to me, and I could be wrong about this, but I have noticed that Trump likes to surround himself with people who were, for lack of a better word, nobodies before he tapped them to serve incredibly important roles in the White House. And when you come up from nothing to suddenly you're in the Oval Office, you also feel forever indebted to Trump, to the guy who did that for you. And I think he wants that kind of environment. But that's just my opinion, that's just my perspective. I hope she gets help. And I'm not saying that as an insult because, again, I think that there's something deeper at play. And as much as I dislike Trump, as much as I can't stand the government or this administration, I don't want people to suffer with, mental health issues that they're not getting treatment for or help for. So hopefully she gets help because you should not be following around a weird 80-year-old who's a war criminal and has done terrible things to this country and the globe with a portable printer. You shouldn't be jumping into his trunk. It's not normal, don't do that. Anyway, we gotta take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about Darline Graham, the one that was anointed to serve in deceased Senator Lindsey Graham's seat. Well, she just had a debate and it was not good. So we're gonna tell you why when we come back.
This is such a, I think that this is a.
Oh my God, man.
We got to fix it. We got to fix it. We got to fix it right. We got to fix it. We got to fix it.
Oh my God, man.
Hey guys, I unfortunately misspoke in that last segment, and I said that Trump passed legislation about experimental treatments in 2028. I meant 2018. Totally misspoke. Apologies. I just want to make sure I corrected that. Okay, lots to get to. Let's go to our super chats. Dav Mills says, how many SUVs has a trunk? 0. I don't know about that. SUVs have trunks, maybe not the kind of trunk a sedan or like a coupe would have, but they have storage in the back. Elliot ZP says, it would be so awesome if we found out he took her with him on like the other plane, but left Melania on the decoy plane. It would not be so awesome. It would, I wouldn't be surprised if he did do that, but I would be disgusted by it and I would not find it awesome. Let's go to James Kelly who says, I just want to say that I love that Gen X on down is tired of keeping secrets in the family. Feel that is spooking a lot of the pedophiles. Look, I definitely agree with you when it comes to these when it comes to predatory behavior, when it comes to crimes like sexual abuse, I 1,000,000% agree with you. I do think some people take the liberty to air their dirty laundry about their family when it doesn't need to be aired publicly. Like work that out privately, it's your family. And I'm talking about smaller, way smaller things that could be worked out through having a talk. Anyway, let's get back to the show.
Al-Qaeda!
Oh my God,
man. Was that a bark, Bart? That was a bark. Was that Harry Ensign barking? That's hilarious. That's hilarious. I've never seen anyone more animated to share poll results with the American people than Harry Ensign. By the way, just a genuinely nice guy, really, really sweet guy. And filmed a video for one of our producers who really likes the work that he does. But anyway, random praise for Harry Ensign. Okay, Even though CNN appears to have banned me for some reason. Let's get to the next story because I want to talk about how we have a real competency problem in our country when it comes to leadership, when it comes to our government. We used to kind of have standards, like if you want to serve the people, you got to have the skills, man. And that's not necessarily the case when it comes to the very person, family member, in fact, vying to take over Senator Lindsey Graham's Senate seat. Take a look.
Senator, are Taiwan and the South China Sea national security issues for the United States? If so, why?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Are Taiwan and the South China Sea national security issues for the United States? And if so, why or how?
I'm just going to be honest here. I'm not on national security. I'm not that informed on national security, but I do support the military. My brother was in the Air Force for 33 years, so I will do everything I can to support the military. My dad was in the Army. I'm not a polished politician up here. National security is not my thing, not my area of expertise, but I do support the military.
That was Darline Graham, who is currently serving as United States Senator in Senator Lindsey Graham's seat. Now, of course, Senator Lindsey Graham is deceased, he died. And immediately we hear news that his sister gets anointed and will fill in for her brother. And as you saw in that debate performance, because she is now running to get elected for that Senate seat, national security, not her strong suit. She doesn't really know much about it. Cool. Now, I just want you guys to think about what's happening in the backdrop of all of this. We have depleted our missile interceptors in wars that we are fighting on behalf of Israel, which is why Trump had to stop kinetic warfare against Iran. Doesn't that mean that we here in the United States are vulnerable if we don't have the hardware to defend ourselves? If, one of the many countries that we have harmed in a variety of ways decides they want to attack us? What are we doing? What are we doing? But okay, let's continue on with Darline Graham, current sitting Senator Darline Graham. So that clip has gone viral and even prompted some criticism from Republicans. Whoa, Republicans were even willing to criticize her. Nikki Haley was one of them. Nikki Haley is a loathsome neocon, but nonetheless, she wrote, Lindsey Graham was well-informed. Okay, well-informed on the United States' national security. I think Lindsey Graham was mostly informed on how he could please Israel, but let me continue with what Nikki Haley had to say. Darline Graham admits she's not. This is not something you inherit. And it's critical in the United States Senate. I agree with the last part. Now, the moderator who asked Darline that very question, Greta Van Susteren, used to be a host over at Fox News, currently an anchor at Newsmax, shamefully, and I mean that word, okay, shamefully apologized to Darline Graham for asking the question. Can we cue up the video again, guys? Okay, I just want to make it clear. Greta Van Susteren, the moderator of this debate, later apologized because she asked this question.
Senator, are Taiwan and the South China Sea national security issues for the United States? If so, why?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Are Taiwan and the South China Sea national security issues for the United States? And if so, why or how?
I'm just going to be honest here. I'm not on national security. I'm not that informed on national security, but I do support the military.
Okay, so Greta Van Susteren apologized for asking, if ever there was a legitimate question asked by a moderator in the middle of a debate for a Senate seat, that was one of them. But here's what Greta Van Susteren said. The media thinks that this one question is so important to only talk about that and ignore the other 19 questions, which our 40 answers. Greta, yeah, that's how it works. People are watching the debate, and the weakest answer from the candidate is gonna get the most attention. The candidates usually know that going into it. Why is that your problem? Why is that your issue? Okay, but let me continue. She says the ad nauseum repeating and replaying today of one answer by Senator Darline Graham makes the media look bad. No, you look bad right now with what you're doing, whatever this is, you look bad. You are providing cover for a candidate who was anointed to serve in a United States Senate seat, is now running to be elected for a full term in that seat, and she's not competent for the job. She's not right for the job. Okay, so what matters here isn't Darline Graham's feelings or your feelings. What matters here is who's best suited to serve the people of the state in the United States Senate. We don't work for them, they work for us. They're signing up to work for us. Okay, they're not our gods and goddesses. Thank God. She continues, that was certainly not her entire contribution to last night's debate. Who cares? And by the way, there's gonna be higher standards for her because she was anointed. Believe it or not, Americans don't like the nepotism. They don't like when people get all sorts of cookies and goodies that they didn't earn. So there's going to, in my opinion, rightfully be a lot more attention paid to how Darline Graham, who is currently a United States Senator, how she's answering these questions. Okay, so while the Newsmax host admitted that her question about Taiwan and the South China Sea was important, she added, quote, I wish I hadn't asked that question. I wish you went away and were no longer a broadcaster of any type. Unless you want to do like celebrity gossip stuff, have at it. But if you think you're in the wrong for asking a legitimate question in the middle of a debate for a Senate seat, then this job is, you're not suited for this job. Move on. There are so many other people who would love to do this. So Darline was appointed to fill the seat of her brother, late Senator Lindsey Graham. We've gone over that. And for now, it's a temporary appointment. The runoff election will be held next week to determine who fills the seat for a full 6-year term. And there are a few other contenders in the race. This is where my eyes start to glaze over and you lose me because electoral politics is just, I find it so boring and irrelevant at this point, okay? I hate Congress, they never do anything for us, but that's just my bias and I wanna be open and upfront about it. But okay, bear with me as I try to get through the rest of this as if I care. So there are a few other contenders in the race, including Republican Representative Ralph Norman. But the catch is that President Donald Trump has put his full backing and support behind Darline Graham, Lindsey Graham's sister. So he called for her to fill Lindsey's seat literally one day after it was announced that Lindsey Graham died. And Trump even went out of his way to call the governor of South Carolina to make sure that Darline served as the interim senator. Later, he wrote the following: Lindsey was one of the greatest people and senators I have ever known, and his sister shares his deep love of our country and the state of South Carolina. During her visit, I asked Darline, for the good of our nation, to run for the United States Senate in the special Republican primary on Tuesday, August 11th, 2026. He says, I hope Darline does this, and she did, she's running, in that there would be nobody better to honor the legacy of her beloved brother, Lindsey. Darline, who comes from an absolutely incredible family, has been a winner all of her life, and should she accept, has my complete and total endorsement in the special election for US Senate in South Carolina. Which begs the question, what would Darline Graham actually do if elected? Like, what are her policy views? Has she stopped to think about any of that? Apparently, she would continue working This is one thing that is certain, okay? She absolutely would continue working closely with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, just like her brother. Let's watch. Do we have video on that?
I have met with the Prime Minister and his wife. They were in town for Lindsay's funeral, so it wasn't necessarily a discussion about moving forward. It was more of a discussion about Lindsay and their friendship and how appreciative he was and how much Lindsay meant to him. And he was very nice, him and his wife both. It was a really good conversation. One thing I did ensure him that I will stand with Israel as well.
Oh, well, thank God. I mean, that's the most important thing. US national security, who cares, as my dad would say, who cares? But Israel, are you gonna keep working with Netanyahu? Yes, yes, well, that's the important thing. That's the important thing. Anyway, that's what we're dealing with. We'll see if she wins. But I just think we need to get back to a place, if ever we were at a place, where we expected competence from our public servants. Because again, whether you're talking about your own party members, let's say you're a hardcore Democrat, you only vote for Democrats, you love Democrats, you still are not, as an American citizen, you're not tasked with serving them, okay? They are tasked with serving you. That is what they signed up for. You pay their salaries. The same goes for Republicans. They signed up to be public servants. Okay, so if you are a member of the media, especially providing cover, doing PR work on behalf of politicians, political candidates, you're not, please don't claim to be a journalist. You do PR. There's nothing wrong with PR, but it's a completely different thing. All right, I got through that way quicker than I expected. But that's okay because the next segment is gonna be a massive one. There is a bit of a tiff playing out between Alex Jones and Tim Pool. I wanna tell you all the details. I wanna show you the videos, I wanna show you the posts. Is Tim Pool a fence sitter? Spoiler alert, yes. Does Alex Jones have a point? I don't know, you're gonna have to come back and find out. We'll be right back.
Because you know what? Learning is cool, my friends. Learning is cool.
Dav Mill, you are just killing the game right now with your super chats. Dav Mill says, I love the Swiss model of armed neutrality, which kept them free as every country around them fell to the Nazis. Every able-bodied citizen was armed. I do like the whole neutral thing. I like the idea of like focusing on your actual national security and not starting wars, not intervening in other countries' wars. What a dream that would be. Okay, James Kelly says the old American government pastime of pushing the debt to the next generation. Yep. And by the way, I mean, the debt started to become a problem during the George W. Bush administration when we decided to invade Middle Eastern countries and start wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Iraq in particular was an unjust war that we were pushed into fighting on behalf of Israel based on phony intel about weapons of mass destruction. So if you look at a graph showing where our debt was year by year, you'll see the graph, it just shoots up immediately in the aftermath of 9/11. Dav Mill says history proves all governments are monsters. I do hate the government, capable of inhumanity. One of the reasons I own guns, armed citizenry is the best guarantee of freedom. I don't know if an armed citizenry is gonna be able to respond to the government in the way that you're thinking. What I do know is seeing what's happening to Palestinians in the West Bank makes me wanna remain armed, so. If you're just tuning in now, I just want to let you know that you missed the announcement. During the bonus episode for our members, I will be interviewing Candace Owens about the materials that she's been presenting on her show that do cast doubt on the whole Tyler Robinson narrative. in the Charlie Kirk assassination story. So our members will get that conversation and that interview first. We will later post it for the public, but I wanna make sure that there are some perks for our members. So thank you to our members. You guys help to keep us independent. We would not exist without you, because let me just say, our commentary on Israel has not, shall we say, it has not been financially sound for this kind of business. Okay, so we do rely on our members, and thank you to everybody who's really stepped in to help us out. Okay, I do want to read one super chat before I go on to the next story, because this is amazing and made me laugh. So Mystic Mac 5555 says Darline Graham is somehow more masculine than her late brother, Senator Lindsey Graham, who is currently burning in hell. You know, some people would tisk a comment like that. Not me though, not me. Anyway, thank you for that, and thank you for the super chat. Let's move on to our final story before we head on over to our bonus episode.
When I see Tim Pool putting on Israeli talking points against me, it's just absolutely disgusting. And it's shameful what he has become. We're gonna be exposing Tim Pool. He wants attention. He's gonna get the attention that he and his cohort, people like Laura Loomer, deserve. Because I'm on any foreign payroll. I don't follow foreign talking points. I follow the Constitution, the Bill of Rights in 1776, 110%.
Look, Tim Pool is a sad fence sitter, and that annoys me. But can we keep the heat on Laura Loomer, Alex? You got me a little bit excited with the Loomer talk. Anyway, so as you just saw from that video, Alex Jones has officially taken the gloves off and is ready to go toe-to-toe with fellow conservative podcaster Tim Pool. I don't know where this came from. It just popped up on my feed, and of course, it drew my attention. So if you're wondering why this is going down, I'm about to walk you through it. Long story short though, Alex Jones is accusing Tim Pool of being a cuck for Israel. Now, is there any evidence to the claim? I don't know, let's walk through it. So this all started over the weekend when Alex Jones did a report that live shows on X allegedly were seeing a 90% reduction in viewership after there was some sort of algorithm change. And by the way, welcome to our world. This is what platforms do. It is the bane, the literal bane of my existence, okay, as executive producer of this program. Because it's like, oh no, YouTube or whatever, they did an algorithm change. They don't tell you what the change is, obviously. And then you have to waste hours of your life trying to figure out what the algorithmic changes are. And I hate it. But anyway, that's just my gripe. So he made it clear that he didn't know if this was like a effort to censor certain voices or if it was like a bug on X's part. But it did seem to be a bug, according to our producer Alyssa, who looked into this story, who produced this story. So I'm gonna go ahead and take her research for it. So Tim Pool did respond to the allegations. Here's what he said. My honest opinion is that you can't go pro-Trump for 10 years, then Trump critical and be surprised if your audience drops off. And honestly, that is a good point by Tim Pool. Because if you do pivot away from what your audience expects you to say, people do get angry and you do lose a certain percentage of your viewership. That's true. But this whole debacle thickens, the plot thickens. So Alex Jones responds with more boomer slop. To which Tim Pool says, open an ice cream shop, and over the years, you have customers who love it. One day you announce you're going to be vegan ice cream and customers stop coming in. This isn't an insult, Alex. It's true. If you're not a vegan, you probably are not looking for the vegan ice cream. That's a great analogy, Tim. But Alex responds with, Tim, it was a glitch affecting all streamers on X. It's now been fixed. Tell Benjamin Netanyahu I say hi. Little quip at the end, I like that. Now, let's get to the Alex Jones videos because he did explain why he's attacking Tim Pool at length in the next video that we're about to watch. Take a look at this.
Look, the reason I'm pissed off at Tim Pool and everybody like him is very simple. Israel spent $1.3 billion officially out of their Knesset to pay for U.S. influencers to attack anybody that's against the Iran war. And it's been clear these guys all follow talking points and are in lockstep. And they all deny they're taking money from Israel. But on record, Israel spent $1.3 billion in the last 18 months. If you go back about 14 months ago, Tim Pool got caught meeting secretly with a bunch of influencers with Netanyahu, reportedly getting marching orders, according to sources. He said, yeah, I met with him and I'm proud of it, but I won't tell you what we talked about. Chatham House rules. So then I post a video about that where he's celebrating because it was a glitch on X. They admit was a glitch that affected all live streams. I thought it was a glitch. I said it's open on censorship and knocked our viewers down in one day, 90%. They're back up. He said, well, that's because, you're anti-Trump. Nobody likes you. And they had all these other influencers, clearly a talking point, saying the same thing. It's clear that a bunch of them have gone public. They get sent the messages every day, what to say, what to do. They put it out. I've just been too nice to these little swarmy, people that sit there and act like they're patriots, but they're not. If you support Israel controlling our government, if you support Israel taking over our military with the NDAA, if you support all this garbage, you're not an American.
I mean, I certainly agree with a lot of what Alex Jones said there in regard to Israel's undue influence over our country, the efforts at propagandizing Americans with all this money coming in from the Israeli government. Obviously we've talked at length about the whole Brad Parscale foreign operative issue. And so he's pointing to something very real here. And to be clear, and I want to also put like my weakness out in front so you guys are aware of it. I don't watch Tim Pool's show regularly, and I'm basing this based off certain clips that go viral on social media of what Tim Pool has to say about certain things related to the Iran war or our relationship with Israel or Israel's behavior abroad, all of that stuff. He's a fence sitter. He definitely is a fence sitter, and it's annoying. PBD does the same thing. PBD's take after the debate with Candace Owens and Andrew Wilson, he's like, oh, who won the debate? I think they both won the debate. Come on, Patrick, come on. Pick a side, be a man. Same to you, Tim. Like it doesn't even make me upset. We have a masculinity crisis in the country. Take a stand, don't be afraid, okay? But Tim Pool does a lot of fence sitting and it's uninteresting. Like people tune in because they wanna know what you actually think. And when you do the fence sitting, people are not dumb. People know that you are fence sitting. They recognize it for what it is. And so I don't know if that's what Alex Jones is trying to reference here, but he does ask Tim Pool a question in the next video. Let's take a look at that.
We cannot tolerate Americans meeting secretly with a foreign government that's openly trying to manipulate our foreign policy and primarying members of Congress and trying to take over our military secrets in the new National Defense Authorization Act. And all I know is Tim Pool follows the exact Israeli talking points. So even if he's not taking money, he is following their talking points. And I want to just say this. Despite the billions they've spent trying to propagandize and buy off influencers, there's still enough loyal Americans, left, right, and center, to see through this and don't buy into it. So you can't buy us all. Answer the question. When you meet with Israeli officials and their head of state, what are their marching orders, and are you or subsidiaries, or you or any of the organizations you work with getting any money from Netanyahu directly, the Knesset, Mossad, their military, or their subsidiaries, or from AIPAC or domestically? Answer the question, Tim Pool. Answer the question. Have you or have you ever been an agent of the rogue state of Israel?
So I'm gonna do a little bit of speculating here, and it is speculation, but if you can remember months ago, Alex Jones was catching some heat from even his own fans because it appeared like he was paying lip service to like Zionist narratives. He was like attacking Candace Owens unfairly in some ways. And so I was like, what is he doing? Like he's kind of built a career off of conspiracy theories, many of which were tied to Israel, some of which turned out to totally be true, by the way. And now all of a sudden he seems to be captured or influenced by Israel. That was my speculation back then. My speculation now is that probably did a little bit of damage to him in terms of viewership, and maybe this is a way to rehab his reputation. I don't know. because this does kind of feel like it came out of nowhere. And he is going pretty hard against Tim Pool. And to be fair to Tim Pool, he's been open and upfront about the fact that, oh yeah, he took the trip. Homeboy definitely met with Benjamin Netanyahu, and he doesn't need to tell me what they talked about. I know exactly why Benjamin Netanyahu invites American content creators to Israel. I know what that trip is about. So let's take a look at this video. He talks about meeting with Netanyahu last year.
Last night I wasn't here. I got late word that I was invited to a private roundtable meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It was under what's called Chatham House rules. For those that are not familiar, this means that you cannot reveal anybody who attended, nor attribute anything to any one individual, as they can deny it, and they would. However, what I love about what the White House is currently doing, when you bring together a bunch of influencers and podcasters who don't know much about journalism culture, whatever you want to call it, not that we respect it tremendously, most people didn't know what Chatham House meant. So with all due respect, it's funny because they bring us into the Blair House, which is where Netanyahu was staying. And immediately people are walking around with their cameras, their phones up. They actually took our phones from us. And I legit thought they would maintain Chatham House rules, meaning you can't quote the prime minister, you can't quote his officials and the other people who were there, but you can report what was said generally. If you wanted an official quote on a specific matter, you would then ask an official once the meeting was wrapped, and they'd provide you the exact quote. Or they would just say outright, like, we haven't put our quotes on that one.
Wait, so you were hoping that nothing would come out about this meeting that you had with Netanyahu in Israel? But since word hit the streets, you're openly talking about it. I don't know, that didn't look good. But anyway, okay, so let's actually look at the article that Tim Pool had up. It was a piece written in the Jewish Insider from April of last year, okay? So let's take a look at that. Pool expressed concerns about increased anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism in the pro-Trump podcasting space, according to sources in the room. Responding to Pool, Netanyahu said that that is the reason he invited the group to meet with him. Again, I didn't need Jewish Insider to tell me this. I was already fully aware because I know how the Israelis operate, but okay. Pool argued that there is a Qatari op to manipulate social media algorithms to make anti-Semitic and anti-Israel episodes appear to receive far more views than, say, tips for picking up women in order to incentivize podcasters and YouTubers to produce more anti-Semitic content. Netanyahu, however, was non-committal in his response, saying only that it's possible. Okay, so let me explain, let me decode what's actually bothering Tim Pool. So when Biden was president, well, that's a target-rich environment for a right-winger like Tim Pool, right? You're not tasked with holding your own side accountable. You get to attack the other side without worrying that your audience might be upset with you. Then Trump gets elected, reneges on his campaign promises, does all sorts of things that we all know Tim Pool would excoriate Biden for, rightfully so. But it's Trump, it's Daddy Trump. So he fence sits all day. He straddles that fence so hard, harder than the top OnlyFans model, okay? Loves to straddle, okay? And that's so uncomfortable. So he's like, my numbers are low, and it's because the anti-Semitic content gets the views. Now, of course, the content he's referring to, I would venture to say, isn't even anti-Semitic. Anyone who actually had the courage to call Israel out on its treachery, well, in the very beginning, there were very few content creators who were willing to do that. So yeah, it did increase viewership, but it was hard to monetize that content because that content always gets demonetized. But anyway, okay, so that's really what's bothering Tim Pool, okay? It's tough to be a fence sitter and expect your audience to grow, but okay. The prime minister emphasized in the context of Qatar as well as Iran that Israel and the United States share the same adversaries. Iran, Netanyahu said, wants to destroy both the United States and Israel. Okay, what total clown, but let's move on. So a few months later in September, Netanyahu met again with influencers at the Israeli consulate in New York. We've talked about that meeting a lot on this show, but here's some more details. He said, we have to fight back. How do we fight back? our influencers, Netanyahu said, according to a video posted on Instagram by Leah, who attended. That community, they're very important. In September, a newly formed firm called Bridges Partners registered as a foreign agent for the government of Israel and disclosed plans for a $900,000 influencer program dubbed Esther Project. We've also talked about that at length on this show. And that's just one way, just one of the ways that Israel, I hesitate to even say that Israel got caught trying to buy American influencers, because they're just so candid, open, brazen. They tell us who they are every day. They tell us what they plan to do every day, and then they do it. So they didn't get caught. They said they were gonna do something, and then they did it. And then the influencers involved whine and cry when people criticize them for being involved in an obvious government-led propaganda campaign. Government-led meaning a foreign government. They're taking money from a foreign government to propagandize their fellow Americans on behalf of that foreign government. Not a good look. But Tim Pool has some experience taking foreign money, right? Anyway, so here's Tim Pool on Batya Ungar-Sargon's show just a few months ago. It seems unconnected to what we're talking about, but it's not. Take a look at this.
Well, unfortunately, it's largely being perceived negatively. There are a lot of people saying that Donald Trump campaigned on no new wars, and I don't come on my show and tell people what they think should or should not be in terms of their opinions on the morality of these things. But one thing I find deeply challenging is the narrative as to why we're engaged in this war, particularly among young people and in social media circles, is incorrect. And as you've already mentioned, there are a lot of people that immediately say this is Israel's ideological war that is pulling the United States into it. They're forcing us into it. But this is quite simply, and I think if the Trump administration really laid into the oil issue here, you might actually get people to accept it. I think one of the mistakes being made is trying to simplify the moral issues around this conflict. Iran potentially being a nuclear power could wipe out Israel, but it could also destabilize the region in general, and all of that's true. But I think the very simple reason for this is they're disrupting oil trade, a large portion of it. And I don't believe that we should sit by, I mean we as in the world, and allow a single nation to disrupt 20% of oil and gas trade among peaceful, cooperating nations that want to trade oil.
Tim, was the oil trade disrupted prior to the war being launched against Iran? The war that you're defending and supporting? Oh, unfortunately, Americans don't support it. Yeah, no duh. Because Americans know why we got dragged into the war in the first place. And it has led to inflation. It has harmed their personal finances. Like, was the Strait of Hormuz controlled and closed by the Iranians prior to Trump deciding to attack them on February 28th? Why are you making it appear as though this war is to get the Strait of Hormuz open? Wow. That guy has an audience, it's amazing. But okay, let's continue. He has responded to Alex Jones in like a variety of ways. Most of them are posts on X. Let's give you a few examples. Alex Jones says Tim Pool needs to come clean on his secret meetings with Israeli government and Benjamin Netanyahu. They're not secret meetings, we all know about them. So I wanna be fair to Tim in that regard. But he responds by saying, I have defended Alex Jones publicly for nearly 10 years. I've never said a bad word of him. Ask yourselves, what makes a man attack one of his allies in media? Well, because he thinks you're corrupt and you're taking foreign money to propagandize your fellow Americans into supporting things that are detrimental to the United States. And I think he's also trying to rehab his image a little bit. But there's more. Tim also says with friends like Alex, this is the lesson of politics. There are no friends, only conveniences. Alex was fine to use my support and show when it served him. Now he has decided I am of less value. It's hard when you realize some people never really were your friend. I know. But honestly, it's kind of true. Don't become besties with on-air personalities, it's a bad idea. I should know. Don't mentor them either, bad idea. I should know. Now, Tim Pool then tries to flip the situation on Alex Jones. I have not seen this video yet, so let's see if he succeeds.
Surface level dude, you know, I read the news. I've got some experience. I know a little bit, but I certainly don't know everything. And so I have to wonder, when you get the likes of Tucker, Alex Jones, Candace, and many others inverting their worldviews on a dime, it doesn't seem organic. Alex makes a weird post saying Tim Pool needs to disclose his meeting with Israel or whatever, and if he ever got paid. And I responded with, it was an open meeting, Chatham House rules. We took pictures of ourselves at the meeting. Netanyahu was trying to lobby American influencers to support war with Iran. They mostly didn't, some did. And I've never received money from any foreign government for any reason ever in my life, and that is a fact. Now here's the weird thing. Alex still has a bunch of fans spam blasting me the same thing over and over again. Why won't you respond? Literally, the first thing I did was respond. Well, the question is, how does Alex all of a sudden have a bunch of generic accounts spam blasting as if something bigger is going on?
Look, I don't know if he took money from Israel. What I do know is he went on that trip, and if you don't want the heat, you don't go on those trips. I've been invited to visit foreign governments by said governments that want me to visit, and the answer is no. I'm not going to go on a government-sponsored trip because it's all about propaganda. It's not just about Israel. It's any foreign country that's involved in some sort of political issue with the United States. If they are asking you as a content creator, influencer, news person, whatever, to come visit on a government-sponsored trip, they're paying for your flights, they're putting you up in hotels, that is obviously gonna lead to questions about whether or not you have a conflict of interest. It just is what it is. All right, well, that does it for the main show. Coming up is our bonus episode, tyt.com/join. I'll see you there.
I don't know. Be sitting pretty, looking cool, sitting pretty.